James thought he had his life all figured out, a stable job, great friends, and a fiancé he had been with for nearly 7 years. Their wedding was just months away, everything planned down to the last detail. But when Lauren, his fiancée, suddenly announces a trip to Italy, things begin to unravel in ways he never expected. What starts as distance soon turns into silence, and before he knows it, James finds himself questioning everything he believed to be true.
My fiancé went to Italy for space 2 months before our wedding, blocked me everywhere, then came back pregnant, claiming it's mine. I'm James, 32 years old, and for a long time I thought I had my life figured out. You know that feeling when everything just clicks? Like the universe is finally throwing you a bone? That was me. I had a decent job, solid friends, and a Lauren who I'd been with for nearly 7 years. 7 years. Long enough to know someone inside out. Or at least that's what I believed. Lauren and I had been engaged for 2 years. We weren't rushing the wedding. We wanted everything to be perfect. The venue was booked, the date was set, and things were falling into place. She had her Pinterest boards for flowers and dresses, and I was mostly focused on not screwing up the guest list. It felt normal, comfortably chaotic, like planning a wedding should be. Then, out of nowhere, Lauren tells me she's going to Italy. At first I thought, cool, why not? Italy's beautiful. She'd always talked about wanting to see Florence, Rome, Venice, all those postcard-perfect places. But the timing threw me off. It was just a couple of months before the wedding, right in the middle of finalizing everything. Still, I told myself it wasn't a big deal. She deserved a break. But then she said she needed space. That word stuck with space. It wasn't like we'd been fighting or anything. Sure, wedding planning had its stressful moments, but nothing major. So why would she need space? I shrugged it off at first, thinking maybe it was just nerves. Everyone gets cold feet before a wedding, right? That's normal. A few weeks later, I'm driving her to the airport. She's practically glowing, talking about all the places she's going to visit and how this trip is going to be good for her. I didn't ask too many questions. Honestly, I didn't want to seem controlling or insecure, but there was this knot in my stomach I couldn't shake. Watching her walk into the terminal felt weird, like really weird. I chalked it up to the fact that we'd never spent this much time apart before. But deep down, something didn't sit right. And that's how it started. The trip to Italy. At the time, I had no idea it would be the beginning of the end. At first, everything seemed fine. Lauren texted me when she landed, sent a few pictures of her and her friends in Florence, and even called me once to tell me how amazing the food was. I'll admit, it felt a little off, like she was just ticking boxes to keep me from worrying. But I brushed it off. She was on vacation after all. The first few days went by without a hitch. Her messages were light and casual. Updates about sightseeing, jokes about how much she was walking, and the occasional miss you thrown in for good measure. It wasn't constant, but it was enough to feel normal. By the end of the first week, though, things started to change. The texts became shorter, less frequent. Instead of long updates, I get one-liners like super busy today or Wi-Fi sucks. We'll call later. Only later never came. I tried not to overthink it. She was probably just caught up in the excitement of being in Italy. Who wouldn't be? But the longer the silence stretched, the harder it was to ignore. By the second week, she'd practically gone radio silent. I'd send her a good morning text and get no reply. Hours would go by and nothing. By evening, I'd sent another, just checking in. Still nothing. One night I called her. It went straight to voicemail. I told myself her phone was probably off, or maybe she'd run out of battery. But the next day, the same thing happened. And the day after that, I started to feel like a ghost. Like I didn't exist in her world anymore. That's when I decided to check her Instagram. She was always posting on there, sharing photos of food, sunsets, or whatever cute little cafe she'd stumbled upon. But when I opened the app and searched for her profile, it wasn't there. At first I thought she might have deactivated her account. But when I looked at her tagged photos, I realized the truth. She hadn't deactivated anything. She blocked me. I remember sitting there, staring at my phone, trying to make sense of it. 7 years together, 2 years engaged, and now blocked. Like I was some random ex-boyfriend she didn't want to deal with anymore. I tried calling again. Straight to voicemail. I sent a text, hoping maybe it was all a mistake. Hey, just checking in. Hope everything's okay. The message didn't go through. That's when it hit. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. For days, I couldn't think about anything else. My mind ran in circles, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong, what I'd missed. Was she mad at me? Was this her way of breaking things off? Or was there someone else? By the end of the second week, I was done making excuses for her. If she wanted space, she could have it. but I wasn't going to sit around waiting for her to decide whether or not I was worth her time. So I made a decision. I started canceling the wedding, the venue, the caterer, the flowers, every single thing we'd planned. Each call felt like ripping off a band-aid. Painful but necessary. And you know what? It felt good. Not at first, of course. At first it felt like a knife twisting in my chest. But after a while, the relief started to creep in. I wasn't going to let her hold me hostage anymore. If Lauren wanted to disappear, that was her choice. But I wasn't going to wait around for her to come back. It had been 3 weeks since Lauren left for Italy, and I hadn't heard a word from her. At this point, I was doing everything I could to move on. My friend Emily kept telling me I'd dodged a bullet, and part of me believed her. Still, there was this lingering sense of unfinished business, like the ghost of our relationship was still hanging around, refusing to let me breathe. Then, out of nowhere, she called. I didn't recognize the number at first. It wasn't her usual one, and I almost let it go to voicemail. But something told me to answer, and when I did, it was her. Her voice was calm, casual even, like nothing had happened. She didn't acknowledge the weeks of silence, didn't ask how I'd been. Instead, she jumped straight to logistics. Her flight details, the time she'd be landing, and a simple "we need to talk." I didn't say much. Honestly, I was too stunned to process it. But one thing was she expected me to pick her up from the airport, like I was just waiting around for her to come back and explain herself. I didn't go. Instead, I spent that morning at work trying to distract myself from the knot in my stomach. I knew she'd find her way home eventually. Lauren always had a way of landing on her feet, no matter how messy things got. Sure enough, when I got back to my apartment that evening, she was there. She looked different, tired, disheveled, like she'd been through hell. For a moment I felt a flicker of sympathy, but then I remembered the silence, the blocking, the complete disregard for me and our relationship. She stood on my doorstep, clutching her bag like it was the only thing holding her together. Her eyes were red, her voice barely a whisper. When she asked if she could come in, I let her in. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed answers. She sat down on the couch, and for a while neither of us said anything. I stayed standing, arms crossed, waiting for her to start. Finally, she broke the silence. She told me she was pregnant. At first I didn't react. The words didn't even seem real. Pregnant? After everything she'd done, after cutting me out, disappearing without a trace, now she wanted to tell me she was pregnant? I felt a rush of emotions. Anger, confusion, disbelief. But above all, I felt betrayed. Not just by her actions, but by the timing of it all. Why not tell me when she found out? She tried to explain something about being overwhelmed, about not knowing how to handle it. She said she found out during the trip and panicked. That's why she blocked me. That's why she needed space. It didn't make sense. None of it did. And then she dropped another bombshell. Her parents knew. Not only that, but they thought I needed to step up and take responsibility. I didn't even know what to say. On one hand, if the baby was mine, of course I wanted to be there. But on the other hand, how could I trust anything she said? That night I barely slept. The weight of everything felt suffocating. The silence, the pregnancy, the way she just assumed I'd fall in line. I kept replaying the past few weeks in my head, trying to piece together the truth. But no matter how hard I tried, one question kept coming back to haunt. What wasn't she telling me? The next day, I woke up feeling like I was caught in a fog. Lauren's news about the pregnancy was still sinking in, but there was something about the way she delivered it that didn't sit right with me. It wasn't just the timing. It was the way she avoided certain details, the way her words felt rehearsed. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept wandering. By lunchtime, I'd convinced myself I was overthinking. Maybe she really had panicked. Maybe the stress of the wedding and the pregnancy had been too much. People make mistakes, right? But then, in the middle of the afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was Megan, Lauren's younger sister. Her message was, "We need to talk." It's about Lauren, that's all it said. But it was enough to set my nerves on edge. Megan and I had always gotten along, but she'd never reached out to me directly like this before. I agreed to meet her that evening at a coffee shop near my apartment. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting in the corner and looking nervous. She kept glancing around like she didn't want anyone to see her. When I sat down, she didn't waste any time. She leaned in close and said, "James, I don't think Lauren's telling you the whole truth." I felt my stomach drop. Megan explained that during Lauren's trip to Italy, she'd been spending a lot of time with a guy named Ryan. He was someone from their college days, someone Lauren had reconnected with before the trip. According to Megan, they were practically inseparable the entire time. She even mentioned a private Instagram account Lauren used to post photos that I couldn't see. Photos of her and Ryan laughing together, sitting at cafes, sightseeing like a couple. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to believe it wasn't true, that Megan had gotten it wrong. But deep down, I knew she wouldn't lie about something like this. When I asked Megan why she was telling me this, she hesitated then. Because Lauren's been telling everyone that you're refusing to take responsibility for the baby. She's making you out to be the bad guy. That was the final straw. Not only had Lauren blocked me and left me in the dark for weeks, but now she was twisting the narrative to make herself look like the victim. I thanked Megan and left the coffee shop, my mind racing. If there was even a chance that Ryan was involved, I needed to know. But how could I get to the truth without Lauren shutting me out again? That's when I decided to look up Ryan. It wasn't hard to find him. His profile was public. Sure enough, there were photos from the trip. One in particular caught my attention. It was a picture of him and Lauren sitting close at a small cafe, her hand resting on his shoulder. Best trip ever. With heart eyes emojis. My chest tightened. I knew I couldn't let this go. I sent him a message. It was short and to the point. Hey, Ryan, I think we need to talk. I wasn't sure if Ryan would reply, but a couple of hours later, my phone buzzed. His response was brief. Hey man, what's up? I stared at the message for a while, trying to figure out how to play this. If I came at him too aggressively, he'd probably shut down, but if I was too casual, he might brush it off entirely. I decided to start cautiously. I replied, I've been hearing some things about the Italy trip. Thought it'd be better to ask you directly. The typing dots appeared almost immediately, then disappeared. It took him a minute to reply. Not sure what you mean. Trip was great, but he was dodging. I leaned into it, trying to keep my tone neutral. Just heard you and Lauren were spending a lot of time together. People are talking. This time his response was slower. When it came through, it didn't do much to ease my mind. Yeah, we hung out. Same group of friends. You know, nothing weird. Nothing weird, right? I took a deep breath and typed, did she tell you she was pregnant? I hit send before I could second guess myself. The dots appeared again and then his reply. She mentioned it. Yeah, congrats, Smith. You're going to be a dad. That should have been comforting, but it wasn't. The way he worded it felt off, like he was trying too hard to sound supportive. I decided to push further. Is there something I should know, Ryan? Just be straight with me this time. The dots stayed for a while before disappearing completely. He didn't reply. That was all the confirmation I needed. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, my mind racing. It wasn't enough to accuse Lauren outright, but it was clear she wasn't telling me everything. If I wanted the truth, I'd have to confront her. The next day I asked her to come over. She arrived looking nervous, her usual confident demeanor replaced by something more fragile. She sat on the couch, fidgeting with her bag while I stood across the room, arms crossed. I know about Ryan, I told her. Her face went pale, but she recovered quickly, brushing it off with the usual excuses. We're just friends, she said. It wasn't anything. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But the weight of everything, the silence, the blocking, the photos was too much. I asked her directly, is there anything you're not telling me? And her answer was the same as you're overthinking it. But I wasn't. By the time Lauren left that evening, I was more certain than ever that I wasn't getting the full story. That's when the idea came to me. If she wasn't going to tell the truth willingly, I'd make her confront it in front of everyone. A week later, I set my plan in motion. Lauren thought I was softening. I hadn't pressed her about Ryan again, and I'd even started responding to her texts. She probably thought I was ready to move forward, to forgive and forget. But that couldn't have been further from the truth. I decided to host a celebration for the baby, a way to bring everyone together. Her family, my family, close friends. It was the perfect setting, and she was thrilled when I suggested it. She probably thought it was my way of showing her I was ready to step up. The night of the party, the house was packed. Everyone was there, laughing, mingling, raising glasses to the future. Lauren was glowing, playing the part of the happy mom-to-be, soaking up the attention. I stayed calm, patient. I waited until everyone was settled before I made my move. When the time came, I stood in the middle of the room, holding a glass of champagne. The room quieted down, all eyes on me. Lauren stood beside me, smiling nervously. I started with something simple, thanking everyone for coming, for their support, for being part of this big moment in our lives. My voice was steady, my face calm. Then I turned to Lauren. This is a night to celebrate honesty, trust, and family, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. And I think it's time we all share some truths. The room went silent. Lauren's smile faltered and she glanced at me, confused. I pulled out my phone. I've been hearing a lot of things lately, I said, still looking at her. Things that didn't make sense. so I decided to look for answers. I tapped the screen and a photo appeared on the TV behind me. It was one of the pictures Megan had told me about. Lauren and Ryan at a cafe in Italy, her hand resting on his shoulder. There were audible gasps from the crowd. Lauren's face turned pale. While Lauren was in Italy, I continued, she wasn't just finding herself. She was spending time with Ryan. A lot of time. Enough that people started to notice her family was frozen, staring at the screen in shock. My family didn't move either, waiting for what came next. Lauren's voice cracked as she finally spoke. James, this isn't what it looks like, isn't it? I asked, my voice sharp. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you blocked me, disappeared for weeks, and spent all your time with another man. And now you want me to believe everything's fine? She started crying, her hands trembling as she reached for me. It wasn't like that. I swear it wasn't. Ryan's just a friend. I stepped back, shaking my head. A friend? Then why hide it? Why block me? Why tell everyone I wasn't stepping up when you were the one who disappeared? Her family looked at her, their expressions a mix of shock and disappointment. Megan stood in the corner, her lips pressed into a thin line, clearly holding back tears. Lauren tried to speak again, but the words wouldn't come. She was breaking down in front of everyone, and for once, I didn't feel sorry for her. I turned back to the crowd. I wanted tonight to be about honesty, and now that the truth is out, I need to be honest too. I can't do this. I can't marry someone who lies, manipulates, and expects me to clean up the mess. The silence was deafening. I put down my glass, my voice steady. I'll be there for the baby. I'll do everything I can to be a good father. But as for Lauren and me, we're done with that. I walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, surrounded by the weight of her own choices. It's been a few months since that night. The baby's here now. A little girl. She's perfect, and I can't imagine my life without her. Lauren and I keep things civil for her sake, but the damage is done. We barely speak outside of what's necessary. Megan reached out to apologize, saying she should have told me everything sooner. I told her it wasn't her fault, but I appreciated the honesty. Emily's been my rock through all of this, reminding me that I made the right choice. And she's right. For the first time in a long time, I feel free. The truth hurt, but it set me free. Now I'm focused on the one thing that truly matters. Being the best dad I can be.